Hey guys, it's competition time. How would you like to be interviewed on the Game Changers Experience podcast as a top thought leader and industry game changer? Well, you can. I'm offering one lucky spot to one lucky listener who'd like to come up onto the show. Now, the great thing about this show is that it's in the top 2.5% global rankings. We're in 43 different countries and we have thousands of downloads from around the world. So if you want to get your message out there in the big wide world, this is a great opportunity to do so. Now, there's a couple of things that you've got to do. Number one is you've got to leave a 5-star review on Apple or on Spotify, and then send me a screenshot or tag me. You can send me a screenshot to hello@adamstrong.net. It's hello@adamstrong.net. And also buy me a coffee. The link is below. Buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee based on the value that you get from the show personally. And then we'll be reviewing applicants over the next couple of weeks, and I'll be making an announcement on June 15th on the lucky winner. So listen, good luck, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
This is the Game Changers Experience. Deep dive conversations with leading business disruptors, Olympic athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and influencers from around the world. This show will teach you insights about the winning principles in mindset, productivity, marketing, branding, entrepreneurship, business strategy, and more. Hosted by Productivity Authority, business strategist, former elite athlete, author, and public speaker, Adam Strong.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Game Changers Experience with myself, Adam Strong. And today we have another fantastic show, and we have a great guy on the show. His name is called John Rossman. Now, John is a business strategist. He's an operator and an expert on digital transformation. He's a leadership and business reinvention specialist as well. He's consulted with really big companies, huge companies, in fact, such as Fidelity, Microsoft, Walmart, and Nordstrom, just to mention a few. He's served as the innovation advisor at T-Mobile, and is also he also served as the tech advisor at the Gates Foundation, which is a real privilege as well. He's written 3 books in the series, which is called The Amazon Way. So it's the Amazon Way book series as well. And he also used to be the former Amazon executive and was responsible for the transition or the invention of the Amazon marketplace, which I believe was around 2002. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we're going to be talking about digital transformation. It's one of those really interesting topics right now. In fact, it's a hot topic that everyone should be talking about. I don't care which leader you're at or what company you're working for. Digital is where we are transitioning into, ladies and gents. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. We're going to be talking a little bit about John's Amazon 14 leadership principles that he talks about in the Amazon Way book as well. We're also going to be talking a little bit about Jeff Bezos and some of the insights that maybe John can talk about as well, about what he had learned in terms of being part of that Amazon culture, which I think is really quite fascinating. But also, what is it that as leaders, what is it that we need to do to adapt and embrace a digital transformation? Because, sometimes it can be really difficult to adapt to change, right? It can be extremely resilient. You can be, especially, you've probably heard of the saying, ladies and gentlemen, you've probably heard of the saying, you can never teach an old dog new tricks. So you've probably heard of that saying before, right? But anyway, listen, I digress. John, welcome to the show.
Adam, great to be here. I hope I live up to your expectations and your energy.
I'm sure you will. Listen, thoroughly enjoyed some of our offline conversations, and I really enjoy some of the things that you're working on right now, and they're very much in tune with today's world. Especially over the last couple of years now, and coming out of more what we call the information age and moving into the digital age, aren't we now? And I don't know what your thoughts are about that. Would you agree?
Yeah, the mission of Rossman Partners is to help our clients compete and win in the digital era. It's that plain and simple. And I think every company, no longer are boards and CEOs dismissing kind of those West Coast lunatics and, this too shall pass, kind of mindset. Everybody knows, like in big ways and small ways, you have to transform how you go about your business. And oftentimes we do that through kind of digital models and digital technologies. And so now the problem is like, well, how do we actually do that?
That's the multi-million-dollar question, ladies and gents. So let's dive straight into this.
Yeah, let's put a B behind that multi-billion-dollar question.
Absolutely,
really.
The billion-dollar question, aha moment.
Yeah.
Because it is a billion-dollar question. So let's talk a little bit about what is digital transformation. I'd like to know, and also why is it so important in this day and age? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, a big question, right? And a really important one. And I like obvious questions like that. What is digital transformation? There's probably lots of definitions out there. But the way I think about becoming digital, it's really about recognizing that there's two playbooks management teams have to recognize and realize the distinction between and continue to sharpen. The first playbook is what I would call the speed playbook, right? You're a runner. If you understand, speed is about highly efficient, highly predictable, highly repeatable motion. Well, that's operational excellence in a business. We have to continue to understand, how do we scale to achieve the operational impact that we need, hitting every customer promise with high SLAs. That's speed. That's part of digital transformation. The other attribute, which is distinctly different, is agility, right? Agility in an athlete is the ability to sense and make change happen. Sometimes that's small change, sometimes that's big change, right? But people don't recognize that those are two distinctly different muscle sets, A, within an athlete, and B, within a company, right? And so we use digital capabilities in both of those. But what I think digital transformation is the ability for a company at scale and in a repeatable, systematic way to be both an expert at speed, at scaling, and at agility, which is the ability to invent and reinvent ourselves in our business. That's what digital transformation is all about.
I love that. That's a good analogy. I love that. That's very, very cool. So I know that, interestingly enough, I know that you wrote a book called The Amazon Way, which actually is not about Amazon, but it talks about the guiding principles around leadership practices, what you had learned as part of that culture and stuff. But can you just give us some insights on the 14 different leadership principles that you'd learned as part of that culture and what they're all about?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity. I was a leader at Amazon from early 2002 through late 2005. I got to run two businesses. I launched the marketplace business. I ran enterprise services. The leadership principles weren't codified at that point, but we were figuring them out every single day. Like, hey, how do we prioritize? How do we make decisions? How do we hold each other accountable? How do we think about kind of short-term results versus long-term results? And those things became the leadership principles. The first and the most famous is about customer obsession, that leaders start with the customer and work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customer trust. They pay attention to competitors, but they obsess about customers. But that's just one of 14. And so really the rest of those of the 13 help support, like, how do we put the customer first across the business, and recognizing we strive for a great customer experience, but we have to deliver a great business also, right? And so those are the leadership principles. So I think like an example of a really interesting one that helps us think slightly differently is a principle that's called "are right a lot." And it reads like this: leaders are right a lot. They have strong judgment and good instincts. They seek diverse perspectives and work to disconfirm their beliefs. I was listening to one of your prior podcasts, and they were talking about CEO blind spots, right? This leadership principle helps address that exact notion of blind spots. As we become experts in our business, that is a blind spot. How do you, a leader is expected to be right a lot, but what's the input? Like, well, how do I get better at being write a lot and avoiding blind spots? Well, it's by what you listen to, especially the opinions and information that disconfirm your current assumptions or belief in your business and in the world. Those are how you learn new things, and then you filter those into, well, what should I be doing next relative to my business? So that's an example of both a principle, but mechanisms that help support that principle, like bring it to life, right? A repeatable thing that you can do. And one of the notions I talk a lot about in leadership is I use the athletic metaphor as you do, which is we all want the championship moments, right? We all want to be on the stand. We want a business that has growth. We want a business that is famous for customer delight and results. But what we're not willing to do is we're not willing to do the everyday work, the inputs in order to get there. So what I really work on is like, hey, what are the little things we need to be doing every single day, surrounded by great strategy, so that we have the opportunity, not guaranteed, but the opportunity to maybe have a championship moment.
Love it. Love it. Some very good. I love that. Some great stuff there. Interesting. I have to ask you this question, by the way. Did you ever work with Jeff Bezos, as in, like, did you have regular meetings with him? I mean,
yes, I did not report to Jeff, but especially in the first 2 years when I was there, when we were launching and figuring out the marketplace business, which today is over 58% of all units shipped and sold, over 2 million sellers on that platform.
Crazy.
We would meet weekly to go through the situation. I also traveled a bit with Jeff to some of our key clients and everything.
Yeah, and I suppose it's interesting because back in the early 2000s, I mean, we're talking about digital transformation now in 2022. He's way ahead of his game, right? I mean, literally, he was creating those systems and processes and frameworks 20 years ago. I'm like, what the hell am I doing?
And what were people saying, right? They were saying, like, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's unsustainable. Right. It won't work in the long run, and I think that's part of having conviction around your mission, but be willing to adjust your strategies and your techniques relative to that mission. And one of the things I would say about Jeff and Amazon is everybody remembers kind of the last 10 years when essentially kind of the stock has been up and to the right, and he's gotten more and more kind of famous and wealthy. He earned every single dollar relative to that. There was a period of about 9 years where that stock was flat and Amazon was being doubted, and he believed in the same things. He acted the same way. He was an optimist, a problem solver, and he used these leadership principles to help build the culture of Amazon. And so I really respect him and what he did, and I think it's just one of a great set of stories about somebody who kind of sees a better way of going about things and is willing to push all his chips into the table and kind of go for it, and stuck at it for a long time before he started to get rewarded for it.
It's really interesting because, I mean, Amazon essentially, they didn't make any money for so long. So I'm sure that he had a lot of doubters and a lot of critics in his ears and trying to sow seeds into his mindset, but he stayed on course, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely right. Well, like a lot of people were saying, like, well, when are you going to be profitable? Well, you really have to double click into, a financial analysis to understand Amazon was profitable on a unit and segment level very early on.
Right.
We just chose to reinvest all of that into infrastructure, into scaling, and Amazon was telling that story to the investor community from the very first shareholder letter, the 1997 shareholder letter, right? And so that has always been kind of the strategy, which is invest in the long term, keep reinventing yourself, keep expanding the business. When I was at Amazon, so this, again, 2002, holiday 2002, 90% of the business was books, music, video. Think about the conglomerate business that Amazon is today and everything. Well, that didn't happen because they had a short-term orientation or because they were taking profits off the table. That that came from exploring new businesses and being willing to invest in the long term.
How did Jeff Bezos essentially ingrain this whole kind of culture of growth and innovation? I mean, what did it feel like? Like, how did people feel about it? Like when they were around him and stuff, were they as excited as he was? I mean, how did it work? Like, I'd love to know more about that.
Well, I think like any kind of culture or leadership, it comes from the tone and tempo of what you practice.
Yeah.
And so, we were always working these like, oh, this is an interesting problem. How do we think about the right answer for this, for in this case, but what's the underlying principles in which we're making this decision or whatever, or, what do we expect out of ourselves and out of other leaders? And so we were always asking kind of these underlying systemic questions that helped us slow down and think about how we're thinking about something, right? And I think that's some of the most important thinking you do is thinking about how you think about something. And that's where these principles came from. So it came from both Jeff's own natural passion, his willingness to learn from others, but then slowing us down. It's like, oh, well, what's the underlying ethos or practice that we're learning from? And then, and this happened a couple of years after I left, they go, hey, we got to codify these so that we're started to scale, right? You go from like people directly impacting people to being able to impact a much bigger team. So you need to think about some different mechanisms. So these leadership principles are essentially probably the most important mechanism of how Amazon has created their culture, which is essentially like how they operate internally. That's what a culture really is. And that culture is successful because it both attracts the right type of people, but it helps repel the people that aren't the right for that company. And I think so many people, they don't understand what culture is. It's part of your business strategy. Yeah. And part of it is to attract the right talent, but make it okay for the wrong talent not to be there. And everybody forgets that latter half of what good culture does, which is it creates a performing team. And you have to be willing to create a performing team out of a culture.
Yep, absolutely, 100% agree. Interestingly enough, I know you talked about this in your book, The Amazon Way, which was all around how Amazon created this, what you call customer obsession. What do you think? And it's interesting because one of the things that come to my mind when we think of the word customer obsession was when Tony Heiser, who was the former CEO of Zappos, the online shoe retailer, that obviously Amazon had bought, for $1 billion, I think, which was, I don't know, I can't remember how long ago it was. I think it was around 2012, something like that, or whatever it might be.
I think it's about right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about right. So in terms of that customer obsession, how do you think that companies could use that model or use that strategy, whatever you want to call it? How could you use that as a way to stand out from your competitors and create that, what we call that unique selling proposition? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's really two lenses that you need to think about customer obsession. At the end, it's all about curiosity, right? Trying to understand your customer, have empathy about what's going on, their orientation to a situation versus your orientation to a situation. The two playbooks are first kind of the tactical or situational playbook. How do I serve today's customer with today's product or service and do it in a way that hits or exceeds their expectations, resets expectations relative to that? And well, how do you do that? Well, you do it through both trying to have great instrumentation in that experience. Like, what are the metrics? How do I know what's going on with the customer? And set SLAs, which are high bar expectations for, what that promise is. And am I meeting that promise? And then building the tools and correcting the errors that go on, back to that speed metaphor, right? That's about high precision. But then customer obsession is always also a strategic notion, which is how do I slow down? How do I think about my customer or new customer and be curious about the more of the upstream and downstream experience? I'm serving them here today. but what happens upstream? What happens downstream? What happens in a bad day for that customer? And how could I serve that customer broader than just I serve it today? That notion is really what's taken Amazon from being a books, music, video online retailer to a cloud computing company, to a publisher, to a device company. It's all been based on understanding that horizontal customer experience and being willing to explore it. So again, I think customer experience has a tactical nature to it, get today's customer perfect, and a strategic nature, explore the broader customer experience and figure out where you could serve them bigger and broader, and then do little tests in order to see if there's a business in there for you.
Interestingly enough, and I was listening very attentively to what you were saying there, around the whole kind of customer obsession. How did I like the principle, and you might use this a lot with your clients, of taking, say, customer obsession, right? And either taking it wide or taking it deep. How did Amazon, or even how can companies use that strategy to go either wide and go deep at the same time in order to hit all different angles? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a playbook underneath that. There's no one simple answer to that, but I think it starts with defining, like, in real terms, who are our customers, right? And so there's tools like personas and things like that you do to really put a name and energy and a definition behind who your customers are. Then you need to really think about, like, well, what's my value proposition? What is my promise relative to that customer? That's both your brand and the service or the product that you're delivering. And then how do we actually evaluate how we're hitting or exceeding that promise, that expectations today? And that starts you on the journey. You have to be very deliberate, like, relative to, I think, those kind of 3 steps, and defining exactly who my customers are, exactly what's my value proposition, my promise to them, and how am I doing to that relative. And then you can shoot out, and there's lots of ways to kind of organize relative to it. But I think those are kind of the 3 starting steps of really enacting customer obsession. But then there's a bunch of little mechanisms you can do too, like little tiny habits you can do. For example, start every meeting with exactly who's the customer that we're talking about, and why does this topic matter to our customer? Mm-hmm. It's 30 seconds out of a meeting, but it really sets the expectation that the customer's not here. We have to represent the customer. It's everybody's job, not one person's job, to be the customer advocate. So let's start every meeting with who the customer is and why this topic matters to them. That's a little tiny habit that you can do that starts breeding culture, which is like the way we do our work, into everybody's job.
I suppose it's kind of cutting on the point of borderline psychology, but also neuroscience, really kind of understanding behaviors. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I absolutely agree. Like, I'm an industrial engineer by background, but I wish I had studied psychology more. And I think I've kind of picked up on it a bunch. My clients are senior executives, and what I oftentimes realize, like, oh, this is, we say it's like, some sort of strategy or growth initiative or something like that. But really, my job is to change this person's mind and then some of their behaviors relative to what they do. And so back to digital transformation, right? And like, there's studies out there that, like, 75% of all digital strategies, digital transformations change, but yet the market is growing over 20% a year. Well, how can both of those things be true? I write about this in my newsletter, the Digital Leader newsletter, on Substack. How can both of these things be true? Well, they're true because everybody knows we need to transform. We need to change the way we compete, leveraging digital models. But B, we're not very good at it. And so I have this thesis of integrated tools that we need to think about leadership and culture and strategy and tools and technology, not as separate disciplines, but as a systematic approach, and calibrate each of those together in order to be successful. Too often, what happens is, they'll retain a consulting firm, a traditional management consulting firm, and they come up with a great strategy. But what they don't talk about is like some of the little habits that senior leaders do that will crush any type of change that's going on there, right?
Yeah.
Like, a little tiny thing that senior leaders do is you'll be talking about a new idea where there's no proof of what it would be. And what they'll do is they'll go, oh, what's the business case for this? Seemingly innocuous question, but it completely shuts down the conversation, right? Because we have no idea what the business case for this is, but because they've been, trained in traditional management science, that's the natural question you ask is, well, what's the ROI? What's the business case? And so to me, like, that's the right question at the wrong time that you're asking. And those are little tiny leadership moves that need to be adjusted.
I like that. It's kind of like looking at from a top-down perspective, like intertwining those principles that you just kind of, rather than kind of looking at I call it a tick box exercise. Oh, we've got the strategy. Oh, we tick that off, and which kind of drives me crazy, really, because
it looks perfect on PowerPoint, doesn't it?
It's completely look like good on PowerPoint. Interestingly enough, I mean, you must have been in meetings with Jeff on a regular basis.
Oh, absolutely, tons.
And so I'd love to know, I would have loved to have been the fly on the wall listening in to what, but how did Jeff run his meetings? Were they short, sharp, and sweet? Were they kind of like long and, sort of tiring and energy zapping? Love to know what his meetings were like, and any advice.
Yeah, I tell a couple of these stories in the book, The Amazon Way and everything, but I would say like they were strategic, meaning there wasn't one type of meeting with Jeff. It would depend upon, well, what's the topic at hand, right? And at his best, which was most of the time, Jeff just loved solving problems, like helping you rethink either the strategy or the tactics, or like what's behind this, like why isn't this working right, and everything, right? And he was such a thoughtful, pragmatic problem solver and everything. He would get frustrated, though, if he figured out a detail in your business that you didn't know. And I think that was a completely fair expectation that of a senior leader, that you should understand your detail better than he was able to figure out and everything, right? And that's really, at the end of the day, was just him letting us know, like, you have to pay attention to the details. The magic is in the details of your business. I also need you thinking big and thinking about growth and scaling and all those things, but it starts with understanding the details, that customer obsession aspect. And that's where he would get frustrated. And again, I always like that's a very fair expectation of me or of others.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. You'd probably get very pissed off on occasions where you think, do you know what? I hired you guys to be better than me. Yeah, I'm telling you what to do. It's like, are you incompetent or something? Do you know what I mean?
But his notion wasn't I'm telling you what to do. It's like, I need you to know what to do, and everything, right? Yeah. Like if his job isn't to tell us what to do, his job was to set strategy and create culture. It was our job to figure out what to do and to help get it done, right? Like, you can't run a big company with a control mindset, and Jeff didn't have a control mindset.
Love it. Very good. Interestingly enough, I wanted to talk a little bit about transformational change, because I know that change can be very difficult with companies, right? It's the larger the company, the harder the change, the longer the change, you're going to get some resistance down the line. You're going to get some, as I had mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation, old dogs that have been in kind of positions and that have been in there for quite some time that are really causing some conflict, should we say, or rubbing the wrong shoulders type of thing. But from your perspective, how should leaders be more open to transformational into the digital world? Because, it's just something that's going to stay with us for quite some time. We've done the information age, we've done the industrial age, we're now moving into digital age. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, first I would say if let's say Netscape going public in 1995 as the start of the digital era, right? Like let's just pick that as a starting point. That's when the gun fired and everything. If you think the change that's gone on in the past now, call it 27 years. If you think the change that's gone on over the past 27 years has been something, my thesis is that is just the warm up period to the next 25 years. I think the next 25 years, it's not going to be more. It's not going to go on a line. It's going to go on an exponential curve of change. And so that's why we need to be agile. Like we need to get better. We need to create a core competency out of change. That's both business change and personal change as well, right? And so this is becoming more and more of a pertinent topic relative to that. The first thing is if you do it early, it's a whole lot easier to do. It's when we delay the change and we wait until the business is static, till we're commoditized, till we've lost enthusiasm from our investors, from our customers, from our employees, and we have to make cuts, and everything. Well, that's when really. And I've been in these restructuring situations and everything, like that's when it's like, hey, you can't be delicate. You have to be direct and draconian, and nobody likes being put in those situations. So the first rule of transformation is be curious and be early. There's this concept of kind of guided wandering, right? What we're typically good at is we're good at kind of setting a goal, creating a plan, and executing that plan. And that works well in the stuff that we understand. But wandering is different. Like we don't really know what's behind the door. We don't really know what the next horizon is, but we can't be random about it either. It's kind of this guided wandering concept. Most big breakthroughs come from guided wandering. Science starts from failure and then iterates its way to success. Most business people are used to like starting with success. Like, of course, success is preordained. Of course, the next thing that's going to happen is it's going to work. That's not the way real change or real innovation happens. You start with failure and then you iterate your way to success. And understanding that is absolutely critical to that leadership model of like, okay, am I operating or am I inventing and innovating? If I am innovating, I have to have a failure mindset, experimentation mindset. So those are some of the things that leadership teams need to prepare themselves for. Is this cycle of experimentation, which is essentially scientific failure time and time again. The key is making them small, doing them, that's what the whole agile methodology is about. All of that is like, keep these experiments small. But again, we're inherently bad at that, right? We load all these obligations, requirements, approaches, stakeholders who can basically they can say no, they can't say yes. You have to operate with speed when you're experimenting. So a lot of the work I do is helping teams separate those two notions, figure out what the right operating model for that is for them, because there's no one right way to articulate that or to execute upon that. But understanding when we're operating in this innovation, digital transformation playbook, like we have to operate at a different speed. And what we're not optimizing for success, we're optimizing for learning. Oh, learning. Well, that's that opens the door, opens the eyes to like, okay, we need to be deliberate about our learning and everything, right? And you try to turn from being a know-it-all organization to a learn-it-all organization, and that is when like true doors of opportunity start opening for an organization, is when you turn to a learn-it-all organization.
Very cool. Love it. It's interesting because I know that reading about Jeff Bezos, he was a bit of a master when it came to reverse engineering, right? He really found a great technique and created this big vision as such, or whatever it might be. And I think that's really ingrained into the Amazon way with regards to reverse engineering a process and then creating something. So you kind of like, reverse engineering the process and then step by step chip at it, and then you get what you've achieved. What's from your perspective, how important is reverse engineering for, especially for companies and businesses and leaders, even if it's to execute a changing culture or whatever it is? Are there any techniques or strategies that you would use or you would advise to maybe clients that you've had in the past with regards to how do I embrace the whole kind of reverse engineering process type of thing? Any techniques or advice there?
What's partly inferred by the concept of reverse engineering is you're learning from others, right? So go out and learn from the experts what you can do, but you can't be blind about applying other people's models to yours. Like, you have to learn, but then delicately and strategically apply it to your own situation. Then B, start with the customer and work backwards, right? Always start with the customer experience and work backwards. But then C, you use your data and truth finding. I write about truth finding in my newsletter. Truth finding means not the easy or the comfortable answer to the situation, but the real answer to what the root cause is. Like, why is this happening? Why isn't it on time, perfect, hitting expectations, exactly what the customer needs and wants? Why isn't it operating perfectly? Why isn't it easy to do? And then you have to be willing to make changes happen, right? You have to be willing to invest to do the next build, do the next iteration on that. And that is the secret of refining the experiences and the processes that have to scale. Not every process has to be scaled. Not every process has to be wired that tight, but the ones that truly matter to your customers and the ones that have to operate at scale, have to be efficient. Those are the ones where you need that really tight tolerance level of it. And reverse engineering really plays a role in, like, hey, what can we learn from others and reverse engineer it from the customer's perspective?
I love that. That's a great thought, Pan. I love that. Some good stuff there. I suppose my last question, because I know that we're coming towards the end of our conversation, you talked about speed quite a lot. And listen, I'm a big fan of speed, being ex-athlete and things like that. But I also believe in the principle of patience. How does one determine what speed to go at, whether it be transformational change or changing culture? But how does one determine what speed one should go at, and what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, so I use speed as a metaphor to, you have to be world class at delivering for today's customer in today's products and services. And speed is about efficiency and repetitive motion, and everything, predictability. Nice. And everything. But the patience aspect is critical, and especially I think patience is really Amazon's superpower. We talked earlier about, like, hey, we were patient about profitability, kind of, and everything. We weren't patient relative to today's orders, but we were patient in terms of reporting profit. We were investing in it, right? They've been very patient on some of the new models that they have been trialing. So, for example, the Amazon Go stores, which has the just walk out technology experience, they've been in about 40 of those stores for the past 5 or 6 years. They're neither scaling it nor are they shutting it down. They're just trying to figure it out. Like, it's obvious it's not quite what they need it to be yet. So they're being patient in that experiment that they're doing there. You have to evaluate every single, idea or trial that you want to do, or new concept. You have to look at it through clear lens. You can't say, well, we are going to have a hard and fast rule that, something has to, be proven out in 3 months or something like that. That won't work for every concept or every idea. I think it's okay to have some guidelines relative to things like that. But if you have a very strict, specific, cadence or set of rules relative to how investments have to work, you're going to optimize for those things that are highly predictable, and you're not going to have that kind of guided wandering mindset for those things that, like, I think this is a good idea, but I really don't know. Like, I can't prove it out today. You're going to skip by those, and maybe that's okay for your business and everything. But I believe that if you truly want to be a company that is always reinventing itself, you need to have a portion of your portfolio, of your spend, of your activity be in kind of this guided wandering place that allows you to explore new capabilities better.
I love that. That's a great wrap up, by the way, ladies and gents. And listen, I hope that you've been enjoying some of our conversations, because I think that what we've covered in the time that we've been talking, I mean, listen, I mean, we could have probably been talking for practically hours on end about, you know, Amazon and Jeff Bezos and John's experience. And I just think I think what we've covered today is like huge groundwork. So, John, I just want to say thanks so much for that. That, you know, we've done a lot of stuff here.
Well, thank you for everything you do, and it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Definitely. So, interestingly enough, because I always like to kind of end on a bit of a high. What is it that you're working on right now? Because I know that you've been, you know, you do a lot of management consulting work, and you've written best-selling books, which is kind of cool. But like, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? I was just curious.
Yeah. I mean, more of the same. I'm at my best. I'm at my happiest when I'm solving real practical problems and putting strategies in place for clients. So I've got a handful of clients that I'm working on today where and this isn't big corporate strategy. This is like a product strategy or a customer strategy or a digitization strategy, an Internet of Things strategy, and exactly how are we going to test, learn, drive for adoption, and iterate. And I'm working on a new book, which is always kind of my hobby. I write a newsletter, a weekly newsletter called the Digital Leader Newsletter, and that that and kind of taking care of the dog more than keeps me busy. So.
Love it. Very cool. Well, listen, guys, hope that you've enjoyed mine and John's conversation today. If you'd like to reach out to John, please do click on his links below. You can do that. And also, if you do reach out to him, do mention the Game Changers Experience podcast, and then he can know where he comes to and to from. And you know, I'm sure in due kind he'll obviously respond. So John, just want to say again, thanks very much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Adam.
Very cool. Listen, guys, hope you've enjoyed today's show. And again, like I say to you, if you enjoyed today's show, please do me a favor. Please do me a favor and also drop us a quick review either on Apple or on Spotify. And if you want to buy us a coffee, and the link is below, buycoffee.com/the Game Changers, then you're welcome to do so. Anyway, from me and John, thanks very much. And hopefully we'll see you again. Take care and see you soon. Hey guys, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to today's episode on the Game Changers Experience. I would be gratefully appreciated if you could leave a good or a bad review. It doesn't matter, 1 or a 5-star review, whichever you prefer, on any of the platforms, whether it be on Apple, whether it be on Spotify, Podchaser, etc. And please leave a testimonial or review about our podcast. And if you have enjoyed our podcast, then I look forward to seeing you on the next Game Changers Experience. Take care, see you soon, etc. And please leave a testimonial or review about our podcast. And if you have enjoyed our podcast, then I look forward to seeing you on the next Game Changers Experience. Take care, see you soon.